The offside law, rugby's eternal headache. If there's one law that makes both rookies and lifelong fans scratch their heads, it's offside. In football, the rule is straightforward. Don't stand past the last defender when the ball is played. In rugby, things get complicated fast. At its core, the rule says you can't be in front of the ball. Sounds simple, right? But rugby is chaos in motion. At a ruck, the hindmost foot of the last player creates an invisible offside line. Anyone standing even a toe beyond it is technically illegal. In open play, if your teammate kicks the ball and you're ahead of them, you're offside unless you sprint back or wait until you're put onside. That phrase, put onside, is where things get truly bizarre. You can be offside 1 second, then legal again if a teammate behind you overtakes you, or if the opposition plays the ball. Essentially, you're guilty until someone else redeems you. Referees don't just judge where you're standing, they also judge whether you're influencing the game. In 2019, during England versus Australia, Elliot Daly was ruled offside despite never touching the ball. Why? Because the ref decided he was close enough to interfere. Imagine being penalised for what you might have done, not what you actually did. That's rugby's offside law in a nutshell. A cocktail of geometry, intention, and referee interpretation that leaves fans in disbelief. The deliberate knock-on, a law that reads minds. Few laws stir up more fury than the deliberate knock-on. The scene plays out almost weekly. A defender sticks out a hand to intercept a pass. The ball spills forward, and suddenly, whistle, penalty, maybe even a yellow card. Here's the wording. If you hit the ball forward without a realistic chance of catching it, you're guilty of a deliberate knock-on. The trouble is, what's realistic? A 6'5" lock reaching sideways? Probably not. A lightning-quick winger lunging with one hand? Maybe. The law forces referees to become mind readers. Was the player honestly going for the intercept or just swatting the ball down to kill an attack? Sometimes the decision feels obvious. Other times it feels like guesswork. One infamous call came in a Wales versus Australia clash in 2022. Nick Tompkins stretched for a pass, barely brushed it, and got pinged for a deliberate knock-on. The crowd erupted, commentators debated it for weeks, and fans flooded social media with outrage. The absurdity of this law is that it judges intent. Rugby is a sport built on brute force. But in this moment, the referee is essentially playing detective. And because intent is impossible to prove, identical plays can get completely opposite outcomes, depending on who's holding the whistle. The crooked feed, rugby's most ignored law. Every scrum begins with the same ritual. The referee calls set, the forwards collide, and the scrum half rolls the ball into the tunnel. At least that's the theory. In practice, most scrum halves don't feed the ball down the middle. They throw it toward their own hooker, like they're bowling in cricket. The law says the feed must be straight, giving both hookers a fair contest. But here's the strange part. Referees almost never enforce it. Week after week, you'll see blatantly crooked feeds allowed without a second glance. Fans often joke that the straight feed died sometime in the mid-90s. The law is still technically in the rulebook, but referees use what's called discretion. In other words, they ignore it unless the feed is so outrageous that it would embarrass the game. When a referee does decide to penalise a crooked feed, players often look shocked, like they've been caught breaking a rule they didn't know still existed. A 2017 match between New Zealand and South Africa saw multiple crooked feeds called in quick succession. Even the commentators laughed, joking that we time-travelled back to the amateur era. So, the crooked feed is this odd paradox. Everyone knows it's illegal, everyone does it anyway, and referees mostly let it slide. It's one of those rugby quirks where the law exists more as a relic than a reality. Obstruction and dummy runners. Legal or not. Few laws create more theatre than obstruction, especially when dummy runners get involved. Modern rugby thrives on slick backline moves, where players charge forward as if they'll receive the ball, only to fool defenders while the real pass goes elsewhere. It's a brilliant strategy, until the referee decides it's illegal. The law bans players from blocking defenders' paths to the ball carrier. The problem is, in real time, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between clever deception and outright obstruction. Did the defender get tricked, or were they physically blocked? Take the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Ireland scored a try against South Africa that was chalked off because the referee ruled a dummy runner had impeded a tackler. Yet just days later, France scored with an almost identical move, and that one counted. The inconsistency is maddening. Fans accuse refs of being biased, coaches tear their hair out, and players are left guessing whether their set play will be celebrated or cancelled. It's a rule that lives in a grey zone, where one person's genius decoy is another's illegal screen. The forward pass. When physics gets involved. Ask any casual fan about a forward pass, and they'll say it's when the ball moves forward. That makes sense, until you watch rugby. The law doesn't judge forward passes by the ball's travel, it judges them by the passer's hands. If the ball leaves the hands backwards, the pass is legal, even if it drifts forward in flight. This happens because of momentum. A player sprinting at 20 kilometers per hour can throw the ball backward, but relative to the ground, it still travels forward. To the naked eye, it looks illegal. To the referee, it's perfectly fine. This disconnect produces some of the sport's most heated arguments. In 2015, during a clash between New Zealand and South Africa, a pass that clearly floated forward set up a try. Fans were furious. Slow-motion replays flooded TV screens. But the law was on the passer's side. His hands had gone backwards. It's a perfect example of rugby's weirdness. What you see isn't always what the law says. And when physics gets involved, perception and reality drift apart. Dangerous tackles. The harshest interpretations. Finally, let's talk about dangerous tackles, the area where rugby's law book and rugby's spirit clash most often. World Rugby has cracked down hard on head contact. A tackle that makes contact with the head, even by accident, is often an automatic red card. The goal is noble: protect players from long-term brain injuries. But the application? Sometimes baffling. A tackler aims for the chest, the opponent ducks, and suddenly there's head-to-head contact. The tackler is sent off, even though they had no malicious intent. In 2022, England's Charlie Ewels was red-carded just 82 seconds into a match for a clash that looked like a pure accident. Fans argue the laws punish clumsiness rather than recklessness. Players complain that it's impossible to tackle legally when opponents lower their body at the last second. And referees? They're stuck enforcing rigid protocols in a chaotic game. It creates surreal moments where bone-crunching hits go unpunished, while glancing contact earns a red. The letter of the law says one thing, the spirit of the game says another. And that contradiction makes dangerous tackle rulings one of rugby's weirdest flashpoints. Quick lineouts, the strange case of throwing the same ball. Back in lineouts already looks strange to outsiders. Two teams forming human elevators to catch a ball tossed in from the sideline. But the laws around quick lineouts take it to another level of weird. Here's the rule: a team can restart play quickly without forming a full lineout, as long as the ball hasn't touched anyone else, and it's the same ball that went out. Seems straightforward, until you add the fine print. The ball has to be thrown in straight down the line. It can't have been touched by the crowd, and, here's the kicker, it must be the exact same ball. So, if a ball boy tosses in a replacement and the player takes it quickly, nope, that's illegal. This law has led to some truly comedic moments. In a 2020 Premiership game, a player sprinted to grab the ball, flung it back to his teammate, and they scored, only for it to be chalked off because the ball had brushed the advertising boards. The difference between brilliance and a whistle? A millimetre of rubber on plastic. The quick line-out is rugby's version of a legal loophole. It promises fast, exciting play, but in reality, it usually ends in confusion and frustration. Accidental. Offside, guilty by proximity. If rugby has a law that feels like punishing bad luck, it's accidental offside. Picture this. Your teammate charges forward, gets tackled, and as they fall, the ball smacks into you, who just happened to be in front of them. You didn't ask for it. You didn't want it. But boom, whistle. Accidental offside. Unlike deliberate offside, this one carries no moral judgment. The ref isn't accusing you of cheating. They're just saying the game can't continue because you accidentally broke the law. Sometimes it's a scrum to the other team. Other times the ref waves play on if there's no advantage. The strangest part is how subjective it feels. Sometimes refs let it slide, calling it ball went backwards. Other times the same scenario is ruled illegal. Fans watching on TV often have no clue why play stopped. To them, it looks like players just collided. In 2021, during Ireland versus Scotland, an accidental offside call killed a potential try-scoring move. The crowd booed, the commentators groaned, and everyone remembered. In rugby, you can be guilty just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Scrum resets, rugby's endless time. Few things test fans' patience like the infamous scrum reset. The scrum collapses, the ref blows the whistle, and instead of moving on, everyone resets and tries again, and sometimes again. The laws say scrums must be stable before the ball is fed. But with 8 giants on each side, shoving against each other, stability is a fantasy. Collapses are common, and refs often struggle to decide who's at fault, so they just reset. In some matches, resets can eat up minutes of real time. A 2013 clash between England and Ireland saw almost 4 minutes pass with nothing but repeated resets. Fans booed, players complained, and the match tempo evaporated. Here's where it gets weird. The law book technically allows for free kicks if a team repeatedly collapses. But referees rarely go that far unless it's blatantly cynical. Most of the time, the punishment is simply starting over. It's one of rugby's quirkiest contradictions. The scrum is celebrated as a test of strength and skill, but in practice, it often becomes a time-wasting, law-heavy mess. Substitution laws, the strange blood bin. Rule: rugby substitutions aren't as simple as other sports. Yes, players can come off and be replaced, but the law book adds layers of oddness, especially with the infamous blood bin. If a player is bleeding, they can leave the field for treatment and be temporarily replaced. That sounds humane. Player safety comes first. But the loopholes it creates are legendary. Teams have been accused of exploiting the blood bin for tactical reasons. In 2009, Harlequins' Tom Williams staged a blood injury by biting a capsule hidden in his mouth. The fake blood let him leave the pitch so a specialist kicker could come on. The scandal, dubbed Bloodgate, led to bans and resignations, but also shone a light on how bizarre the rule was in the first place. Beyond the blood bin, substitution laws also have quirks like tactical substitutions versus injury replacements. If you're substituted tactically, you usually can't come back. But if it's for injury, you can. Referees often end up playing detective, trying to judge whether a player's limp is genuine or convenient. It's one of those areas where the law tries to balance safety, fairness, and strategy, but ends up looking ridiculous. The ruck. Hands off. Except when you can use them. The ruck might be rugby's strangest ecosystem of laws. The basics say, once a ruck is formed, players can't use their hands to play the ball. You have to use your feet to push or hook it back. Hence the famous referee cry, hands off. But of course, the law isn't that simple. For starters, the scrum half can pick up the ball once it's out. Defenders can also counter ruck and drive players off it, and if a player gets to the ball before a ruck fully forms, they're allowed to snatch it. The difference between legal turnover and illegal hands is often less than a second. This creates moments where fans and players are convinced a turnover is clean, only for the referee to blow the whistle. In a 2019 Six Nations match, England thought they'd won a game-saving turnover against Wales, only for it to be ruled hands in the ruck. The decision flipped the match and sparked weeks of debate. To outsiders, the ruck looks like chaos, bodies piled up, boots flying, and a whistle blowing at random. To insiders, it's chaos with rules, except those rules change depending on interpretation. Kicking out on the full, geography matters. Here's a law that feels like it was invented by a geographer. If you kick the ball directly into touch from outside your own 22-meter line, it's a turnover, line out to the other team where it landed. But if you're inside your 22nd and do the same thing, it's your throw. It sounds simple until you realize how much it depends on tiny details. Did the player's foot cross the 22nd before they kicked? Was the ball carried back into the 22 by their own team? Or did it come from open play? Those distinctions decide whether you gain 50 meters or hand the ball back. One of the strangest scenarios happened in 2021, when a player caught the ball just outside his 22, then stepped back in before kicking it out. The referee ruled it illegal, even though to most viewers it looked perfectly fine. It's one of those laws where a matter of inches completely changes the outcome. And when matches are decided by territory, those inches can mean everything. The mark. Free kicks from a catch. One of the strangest and oldest laws is the mark. If you catch the ball cleanly from a kick inside your own 22-meter line and immediately shout mark, the referee blows the whistle. You're then awarded a free kick with no pressure from opponents. It feels almost medieval. A player can go from being under huge pressure to suddenly standing still while everyone has to back off. The law rarely comes up in modern games, but when it does, it always feels like someone just shouted a magic spell to stop time. Kicking out on the full, the 22-meter exception. Normally, if you kick the ball straight out without bouncing, the opposition gets the line out back where you kicked it. But if you're inside your 22-meter line, you can kick directly into touch and gain ground. It's a tactical lifesaver, but also one of rugby's most confusing quirks for casual fans. They see one kick punished, another celebrated, and wonder what the difference is. The 22 exception law is clear on paper, but in practice it feels arbitrary, sometimes even game-changing. Obstruction. The invisible wall. Obstruction is another law that feels more like interpretation than rule. Players can't block or shield runners, but rugby is full of bodies colliding, so what counts as obstruction depends on the referee's eye. A decoy runner is legal until the ref decides it wasn't. A support player can run beside you until the ref says they blocked a tackler. Teams constantly push the boundaries, leading to furious debates after every big call. For fans, it often looks like guesswork, with the same move called legal one week and illegal the next. Knock-on. Confusion. Forward but not really. The knock-on law says if the ball goes forward off your hand or arm, it's a knock-on. Sounds simple, but the debates explode around what counts as forward. If your hand knocks it backwards but momentum carries it forward, that's fine. If it glances sideways but looks forward, referees may still blow it. And don't even start on the difference between a knock-on and a deliberate tap. Fans watching at home often can't tell the difference, leading to endless arguments about what's legal and what's not. Kicking at goal, time limits, and superstitions. Even kicking at goal has its weirdness. Players have 60 seconds for a penalty, 90 for a conversion. Take too long and the ref can disallow the kick entirely. It sounds fair, speed the game up, but it clashes with rugby's obsession with rituals. Some kickers go through long choreographed routines, and the clock ticking down adds an extra layer of pressure. The strangest part? The law is rarely enforced consistently, so sometimes players waste time with no punishment and other times they get penalised brutally. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.